This is Hunt Nebraska, the official podcast for insight into Nebraska's hunting and shooting sports community. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, our space for sharing stories, information, tips, and techniques. Now, Hunt Nebraska.
All right, guys, we've made it. How to Deer. This is episode number 6. This is one that we added on before we kind of got everything put down on paper and started recording this. But welcome for those that are listening to us, whether you're in your car, your home, your house, your office, wherever it might be. Appreciate being able to go along for the ride, but also those watching us on YouTube. As you can see, for those on YouTube, we've got a little bit different digs that we're working on here. We're changing things around, getting to the Hunt Nebraska cabin all set up and ready to go. So that's going to be fun. But this is episode 6 of How to Deer from our Hunt Nebraska podcast. Remember to jump on Facebook, give Hunt Nebraska a follow on there, and make sure you give us a subscription, subscribe, follow, whatever you want to do on your favorite audio podcast app, and make sure you get that so get notifications of when we drop our next one, because this is just kind of wrapping up this series, and we're going to jump into a whole bunch of more fun stuff here. But this one is called Holy I Got a Deer. That is one thing. I think that there are folks out there that would love to try deer hunting that just kind of get a little bit nervous about what do I do if I actually get one. So real fast, though, before we jump into that conversation, we got to introduce our experts. Jeff Rawlinson, he's with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. Jackson Ellis, also with Nebraska Game and Parks, Hunter Education, and Kayla. Now you can actually see our super extreme producer.
Finally, yes.
Kayla Gattikin over here, and we were able to track down a 4th mic. Did you notice that? As soon as she's on camera, she got a microphone.
You've been on every episode, just not on every episode. You've been in every episode, just not on, yeah.
Behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes.
And she does some magic after the episode as well.
A lot of magic.
Yeah.
which is great. So this one here, again, this is something that I think intimidates some folks. I mean, you get any critter down, you harvest that, make a good shot, archery, muzzleloader, rifle, it doesn't really matter. And now you know you got to do something. And knowing exactly what to do kind of makes folks nervous at times. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into some of the ways that, things you got to do legal. Things you got to do and should do to make sure you get some good quality wild protein there in the freezer or on the table. And we'll get into a couple other things as well, but kind of walk us through this, Jackson, right after the shot. I mean, for most people, they realize they make that good shot. And I got to go get that deer. How do you do that?
Well, were you talking firearm or bow? I mean, we kind of break them down a little bit differently. I mean, it's kind of the same principle, but there are some differences there.
It doesn't matter for me. I do the yippee dance with the bow. Yeah. I put the firearm down, do the yippie dance. It doesn't matter to me. I get pretty excited.
I got to take a seat real quick because that's when the adrenaline hits.
Yeah.
I'm
if there's no adreline, you're doing it wrong. Yeah.
Yep.
I agree.
And one thing that I'll say is it's exciting. I mean, I think there's times even now when I know I made a good shot, it's kind of like, cool. Did that really happen? Because deer hunting's a lot of waiting, a lot of patient waiting.
Strenuous anticipation.
There you go. Did my scouting work out? Did I put my stand in the right spot? Is everything happening? Is the wind coming from the right direction? Are those deer going to be moving through on this trail? And when it comes together, just like cool, really cool. But it is almost like, wow, did that just happen? So yeah, let's start alphabetically. Let's start with archery then.
Okay. Yeah. So the big thing is try to get a feel for where that arrow hit and where that deer went. So when you make that shot, try to have a feel for the angle the deer was at. Try to get a feel for where that arrow entered, see if it exited. I like lighted nocks. I think they make it very easy for that. And then where that deer went and how it was acting. You can get a very good feel for how, what kind of shot you made based off of the reaction that the deer gives you.
See, he's spoken like a true bow hunter, isn't he? Right? Gun hunters, I'm like, punching the tag. I mean, we're done. Yeah. But you're right. You're exactly right. There's a lot that goes into that right after the shot. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't think about those steps. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, and even if you know you've made a really good shot, just like it shows to in the Hunter Ed manual or online or what have you, archery, you don't just start trailing it right away, do you?
No. Even if I know I've 10-ring that deer. If I didn't see him go down, her, whatever, if I didn't see it go down, I'm waiting at least a half hour. That gives myself some time to calm down, really think about the situation, and then try to go find my arrow. But it kind of depends. It really is kind of situational. But the big thing is where to go, give it a little time, and then slowly start to dissect exactly what happened. Try to find your arrow, try to find that first point of blood, and get a sense for where that hit was. Because your arrow in that first blood spot can really tell you a lot.
That's a good point.
So what would be different in a firearm situation?
I guess there's not really a ton difference there, is there? Yeah.
Not really. You're going to go through the same motions. Now, you know, obviously you might drop a deer faster with the firearm just because of all the shock and trauma, but not really. I mean, a lot of times you hit a deer with firearm, they're going to run a little bit too. So you kind of go through some of that same scenario, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I do a lot more archery hunting nowadays, so I'm trying to backtrack a little bit. Yeah. But.
Yeah, and I think one thing is sometimes, what's kind of surprised me on both, but maybe more so on archery, and this is where the light and ox kind of helped me out, is you can hit it just perfect, and it's almost boom. I mean, they might jump like they got stung by a bee and then just go back to being a deer and wander off like, did I really hit? Mm-hmm. Did I really get that deer? I've seen that with the firearm too, but probably a little bit less because there's a transfer of energy there where that sharp broadhead just slides right through.
But I think the key point here is that it's all shot reflection, right? As soon as you make the shot, rifle, pistol, muzzleloader, archery, doesn't matter. You know, you should go into that immediate, which we all kind of do, that immediate reflection mode. What just happened? Did that just happen? That was cool. Where was the shot? How'd that deer react? You hit the nail on the head. I think it's the same for no matter what you do.
Yep. And you can tell, you know, with a rifle, it's more about how the shot felt to you, what the crosshairs looked like when the gun went off. Yeah. Whereas with archery equipment, you know, you can see that impact point, hopefully, a little bit better anyways.
Yep. All right. So we do the blood trailing.
Yep.
And there's some videos online and things like that we can point people towards. You know, the color of the blood can give you an idea. If you don't know exactly where that projectile or arrow hit, bubbles in the blood and all that type of stuff. But let's say you find that deer, Jeff. All right. First thing that you need to do when you get up and, I was successful. Here it is.
And again, I'm going to be more methodical than what you might be thinking. But the first thing we do is we find that deer and make sure approach it in a manner that's safe, and make sure the deer is actually expired, dead, so that that's not an issue there. And then, you know, methodically, I'm going to make sure that the archery equipment or the firearm is rendered safe before I do anything else. Yeah, and for the firearm, that means opening the action, unloading the gun, setting it down, away from the animal. You know, archery, you know, putting the arrow back in the quiver, setting it aside away from the animal. But then I have a dead animal down there. The first thing I need to do is I need to get out my tag, and I need to punch the tag, and I need to put the day to kill, sex, and all that.
Yeah, walk us through that. What does it mean to cancel a tag?
Yeah, we're canceling a tag. You're basically saying that, you know, I've got this tag. This is my permission slip to take, you know, that particular animal. And when I cancel the tag, I'm saying to the world that I took that animal on this date, and it was this animal. And what that does is it allows everybody on, you know, from law enforcement to the check station or what have you, allows everybody to understand that you understand you're done hunting on that permit. You've ended that permit because you took that critter. And it's really maybe one of the more overlooked things, but it needs to happen right away. It's not something that happens on the way to the check station or after the check station. It needs to happen right there on the ground.
Well, going even a higher view of that, there's a really cool thing that happens there when you cancel your tag, because that animal goes from being public property
to yours,
to being private property.
You got it.
And that's cool.
Good point.
I think that's really cool.
As soon as you cancel that tag, that's your animal.
Right.
It doesn't belong to the people anymore. It belongs to you. And that is cool. I agree. That's cool. That's a good point.
And something else to keep in mind, this is something that needs to take place before you move that animal, before you start field dressing, which is what we're going to be talking about next. It needs to happen as soon as you know you've got that critter. It's in your possession, so to speak, and that makes it official. And best way to do that, just poke holes in it with your knife. You got a pin nearby. I know sometimes you got to scratch it out some way to make it noticeable. So that's, you get checked by a conservation officer, you can prove. Now, don't forget that photo. That is a big one.
I was going to say, next step.
We carry that cellular device with us now. We call it a phone, but we hardly ever use it as a phone. We use it as camera. We use it as entertainment. We use a lot of different things, but make sure you snap a photo. And real quick, Jeff, I know there's right ways to do that and wrong ways, so that you have something that you can look back on. It's like, oh, that was a good time. Or one of you that when you show other people, they just kind of, and nobody wants to see it.
And the best way I can say is honor the animal, and if you can shoot a photo with dignity and honor the animal, you'll have no issues. But you yourself, if you don't shoot a dignified photo of the animal, even you yourself are going to go back and go, I don't remember the hunt like that. You're going to see it and go, that's not how I remember it. It was a little more dignified than that, but it won't look as good. So, little things like, blood, there's blood when you hunt, because you're killing an animal, there's blood, but you clean up the scene, clean up the animal, or even move the animal to a scene near, just over out of the frame, so that, in a new frame, so that you don't have, blood in the scene. That tongue's always hanging out of the scenes. I like to put tongue back in. A lot of guys will debate that. I don't care to debate tongue back in. I want that animal to look dignified like it was before I shot it. And so I'll put tongue back in, and then my position. I'm not a big fan of guys straddling the animal like they've conquered it. I don't ever feel like I've conquered it. I feel like we both played this game of wits, and I just happen to have the upper hand today. Doesn't mean I would have it tomorrow, but I don't want it to look conquered. I want it to look like I've got a majestic animal here, and I absolutely respect this animal. And so to me, it's beside the animal, holding it up by the head or the antlers or what have you. And it's pretty simple, but it sure looks a lot better in photos in years to come.
And I think it looks better there out in the field before you field dress it. That's why why we're reminding everybody at that point, rather than in the driveway, in the garage, on the tailgate, that type of stuff. You'll get some of those photos because you'll have friends and family that might snap that. But also, make it look alive and capture some of the habitat in which you were hunting in and where you found it, which is pretty good. All right, we got to jump into it, because this is what a lot of folks are really wanting to jump into. Field dressing. Now we know we've got to do something. We've got our pictures taken and our permit canceled, all that stuff. And I remember back in Hunter Ed, or I remember someone talking about, all right, got to get the guts out, got to do that field dressing, that processing, whatever you want to call it, there in the field. Jackson, I know Jeff brought his knife, so we're going to get to him here pretty quick. But what are the basic field dressing things you take to the field with you, maybe every time you go?
Yeah, no, I've always got them in my backpack. I've got a little bag that I carry. It's got a bladed knife, so a strong. I don't like the gut hooks. That's just never been my thing. But something like I like a drop point, good drop point knife. I use a scalpel knife, so I've got one of the replaceable blade scalpel knives, and then it's about a 5-inch bone saw. T-handle on it, and those are the three things. I keep my licenses in there. I keep my I do have some gloves. I don't always use the gloves, but sometimes they get used. And then I keep, what else is in there? Some paper towels.
Good idea.
And zip ties.
Zip ties. What do you use the zip ties for?
So I use the zip ties for a couple of things. One, to affix the tag. So as long as it's not raining or whatnot, when I want to fix the tag to that animal, you can keep it on your person, but that was always something that we did when I was a kid, is we put the tag on the actual animal. And some states do require that.
Yep,
so
they do.
But that's kind of my field dressing kit there.
All right. I'm a big believer in gloves. I don't know about you, Jeff, but I find that as soon as I start field dressing anything of any size, my nose itches. And there's nothing worse than having stuff on your hands and having to rub your nose or scratch your cheek or anything like that. I've gone to the point, and this is probably from some of the minter hunts and new hunter programs we've put on, I have the shoulder length exam gloves that you can find at a lot of tractor or farm and ranch type stores that go all the way up to your shoulder. Now, folks, they feel like bread sacks on your hands. They are not form-fitting by any means, at least not the cheap ones that I buy. And so over top of those, I take those little nitrile gloves that kind of pinch things down and that I'm able to operate just a little bit. Got to take those out with you, so I just kind of roll them into each other and use them to help maybe grab some other pieces and things that need to come out as well. But I've become a big believer in that. Jeff, do you have anything else you want to add to that list?
You guys hit the nail on the head. One of the other things is I always have a headlamp with me. because it's sometimes it's just inevitable. You know, make a kill in the evening, and by the time you get to field dressing, you know, the sun's starting to go down. It's getting a little dark, and put that headlamp on. You know, now back in the old days, 20 years ago, I'd have a flashlight in my mouth and drooling all over the thing. You know, with the headlamp on, it's just so much slicker now. You know, you put the headlamp on, and you can clearly see, even at twilight, you can just clearly see everything, and just go to town. So that'd be my addition.
You know, we had those in our nice to have section in our gear to deer earlier, and I think it may be more of a necessary thing, especially when you get a deer. Even if you've got somebody above you holding the flashlight and you've still got your two hands, having that headlamp right on your head and being able to light up exactly what you're looking at.
Because I know the people who are holding that flashlight, and they got the attention span that I got, right? And so by the time I move up here, they're still looking in the woods and looking up. Oh, yeah, well, you know. So yeah, I like to have control of the light.
Yep.
There you go. And to be honest with you, failing all that, folks, the other thing I would do is just make sure you hunt with a butcher, because they are really good at field dressing.
Bring your processor with you.
That's right. Yep. No, I know just a few people to do that. But all right, Jeff, here we go. Step by step. We're going to do this step one. Where are you going to go, and where are you going to start on this? We got our gear. We got our knife out. We got the critter down. What's step one?
Okay, so once the animal's down, step one is I like to lay the animal on its back as best I can, and if I'm hunting with a bow, I certainly need to judge whether the arrow made it clean through or not. Are there broadhead blades inside the animal or carcass that I got to worry about or not? I've had that happen a few times. You know, arrow broke off in the animal, so I try to determine if that's the case. If not, I'm clear to go. Step one, lay it on its back, and then it's going to start to make incisions. Now, you can start up at the neck and work your way down, or you can start at the bottom and work your way up.
What's the Jeff Rawlinson method?
Jeff Rawlinson way is I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. Yeah, and there's a lot of ways of doing this. I will usually start down
at the bottom.
Literally at the
bottom.
Well, just about.
Okay, all right.
I'll usually start down in the scrotal area, and I'll open up an incision right around the scrotal area of the deer, and make, and I can remove those sex organs. I leave the sac there on a buck, or the outside skin on a doe there, but I'll start down there, opening up that skin, and then take that skin all the way up to the stomach area and up to the chest. And then I'll have a muscle area there that I'll come back in, and I'll take the knife and zip that back up as well, and just completely open the animal. Now, once I've done that, and I can go in there easily after that and separate the esophagus. That's one of my first moves once the animal's open, is I reach in there and I grab that esophagus and separate that esophagus. Everything's pretty much connected from the esophagus all the way down to the end. And so I'll start pulling that esophagus off and kind of teasing out any connective tissue, diaphragm connection below the lungs and whatnot, and just keep teasing that out. Now, before I'm done, one of the last things I'll do is go back to the bottom, and the sphincter muscle, if you will, needs to be separated. Otherwise, everything that comes out is still connected at that bottom.
The poop chute.
That's right.
You got to
now they make tools for that. There's a tool we call the butt out tool, and which is a good tool. It works really great. I will tell you, I've learned it's not acceptable to put that in the dishwasher when you're done to get it clean, but who'd have thought? But that thing works really well. It's kind of a couple twists and pull out, and you've got that whole membrane separated. But you got to cut that out around the anus so that you can separate the rest of the organs as they come out. And I just, from the esophagus on down, just keep removing organs, and then one of the last things I'll end up doing at the bottom is the pelvis, and the pelvic girdle, the pelvic bone on both sides needs to be cut and separated. Now, is it a must? Maybe not. You can work around it, but it's a lot harder if you just cut that thing, like Jackson said, a little T-handled saw, and just cut that thing open. Now that pelvic, which is sitting like this, just splays open, and everything can come out pretty easily from that point on. And I just keep working everything out from the esophagus on down, just keep pulling it out with my hands, working it out, and it'll smell, and it'll be slimy, and it'll be hard to grab onto everything, but and it pretty much comes out all connected pretty easily at that point. The whole process maybe takes a few 4, 5, 6 minutes to do, depending on the deer. Now, when it comes to the sternum, especially on larger deer, where I want to get up inside that sternum to separate the esophagus, because I don't like to leave that much esophagus inside the animal. So a lot of times I'll actually take my knife and split right up the sternum of the deer, and there's a soft tissue going up that sternum, and I'll take that knife and just kind of cut right up that sternum so I can open that chest cavity all the way to the base of the neck. If I'm going to mount the deer, that's a different story. We do things different, but then I can reach in there.
And Jackson, this is probably where you use that bone saw you were talking about, right up through some of that pelvic girdle and the up through the rib cage.
The bone saw is for the pelvic girdle and for the chest. You can do the knife with the chest.
It'll work just fine, but big deer, it really gets tough.
It does, and it dulls your knife. And
So, Jeff, talking about knife, and we'll ask both of you, some people think, all right, I use a 7-inch fillet knife on a fish. Yeah. All right. And a deer,
must need a sword.
lot bigger than a fish. So, but be honest with you, I don't use that long of a knife on a deer because one, as you're talking about zipping up through, and you kind of mentioned that you're not going through a whole bunch. You're not going through 6 or 8 inches of deer in that. You're probably going through, less than an inch.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, less than an inch. Yeah, and you're exactly right. 3 to 4 inches on a fixed blade knife is just about perfect for deer. You start to get beyond that 5, 6 inches, you just got more knife getting in the way, to be honest with you, because the longer the blade, the farther you are out working on the animal away from the edge of that blade. The closer you are working the animal with that blade, the more leverage and control you have over the knife. And so 3 to 4 inches is just about perfect on a fixed blade. I like fixed blades because they're just easier to clean. I've done lock blades and whatnot. They're just a pain to clean because you get all kinds of stuff inside of them, and that's just not fun to clean out. This has that, we call it the gut hook, but it's more of a zipper really. So I use knives that have a little gut hook or zipper on them, and I can just invert that and just zip right up the animal. And I mean, it just cuts beautifully. And the nice thing about it is when you're cutting over that stomach area on a deer, opening up you're going to go through hide, then skin, and then you've got the fat and muscle layer. And for some reason, people get the hide and skin open, but that fat and muscle layer is a challenge, right? Because all the internal organs are pushing hard up against that fat and muscle layer and bulging out against that fat and muscle layer. So sometimes I'll actually take my 2 fingers and put them up under there and then slide the knife up with my fingers and make sure I'm not nicking any stomach or intestine. But with the zip blade, I don't really need to do that. I just put the zipper down in the cavity there and just start pulling up, and it just zips it right open. Then if I miss the muscle layer, I can go back and zip open the muscle layer, and I've never nicked or hurt anything on the internal organs. But if you're going to actually just use a regular knife without a zipper on it, a gut hook, then it really works to get your 2 fingers under there and keep lifting that skin and or fat layer and muscle layer away from the organs, so that you're cutting away from the organs at all times, so you're not nicking those organs. Because you think about that body inside that deer, it's a very sterile environment until you opened it up, and the least sterile is the intestines, the stomach, and all that. Outside of that, everything else in there is pretty sterile until you open up the air and start meddling around in there.
All right. Anything you need to add, Jackson?
No, I think you covered it really well. I mean, it's really hard to listen to this and get a feel for what it is. So if you've never done this before and you're listening to us and you're going, what the heck are these guys talking about? Yeah. It's watch some videos, listen to kind of our tips and tricks that we're going to share here, and then go out and do it.
You're going to let them get off that easy. My goodness.
Don't hit the stink gland. Don't hit the stink gland.
Yep, there's... You covered it pretty dang well. I mean, you start at the genitals, work your way back to the anus, make that incision up, make sure you don't nick any of the guts. With a deer that I'm not going to mount, I take that incision all the way up to the chin, and get as much of that esophagus as I can. Yeah, good point.
What do you do different, Hershey?
Oh my God. Like I said, I find somebody else. I fake the old football injury and like, all right, Logan, take it from here. No, I think it's one thing that we need to reiterate. If you haven't done it before, there's not a whole bunch you can do that hasn't been done and probably won't be done again this fall, this deer season. It's really hard to completely mess it up to where you can't come back. We've all been there. We've poked the bladder, we've poked the stomach, anything like that, the intestines or things like that. Not the end of the world. It's going to take you a little longer. That's fine. And as Jeff said, it's going to stink. There's a reason those are mostly things we don't eat inside the deer that we're taking out right there. So you just have to be ready to go for it. And once you do it a time or two, it gets just that much more simple.
It gets pretty self-explanatory.
Less intimidating. And I change mine up just a little bit all the time, depending on how far I need to take that deer out, which is something we're going to be talking about here soon. If I got a long way that I got to drag it, I'm probably not breaking the pelvic bone. I'm not going up through the rib cage. If I can drive up or it's a short drag, then You bet. I'm cooling that deer off pretty fast. But this is a good question, Jeff, and I know you've been studying up on this because you've got some deer hunts taking place in pretty rugged country perhaps this year out in western Nebraska. There's places where it might be a mile walk in to where you're going to hunt. And if you're successful out there, you're not putting this deer on your back and just, giving it a piggyback ride on the way out. You can actually do some quartering of that animal legally.
Yeah.
What is that here in Nebraska? What are the regulations on that?
That's a good question because especially in the tall and uncut, that can become a real issue. You don't want to be the person that has just game meat to check in. That doesn't cut it, all right? So you don't want to have that because that's not very identifiable, just having game meat. And so we have to have some identifiable characteristics on that animal. Yeah, and that just goes without saying, makes everybody's job a little easier. And so when we talk about deer, we quarter down. We can, we're separating out from the loins and the quarters. And the quarters have to be naturally attached to the scapula or the femur. And so as long as you're quartering out a deer in that manner, you're going to be safe and legal here in the state of Nebraska. Anything below that, you have to have that deer checked in first. And that's just for deer. But again, one of the things that a hunter always wants to think about is, how can I make a game warden's job easier, right? And if I'm standing there with a pile of deer meat, that didn't make his or her job easy at all because who knows what that is? I mean, that doesn't say anything. But to do that correctly, pretty easy for everybody to identify what's going on.
One of the phrases I've heard is, you're going to make a game warden guess, I guess you're getting a ticket. It's probably pretty truthful.
Yeah. Well, there's a chance it doesn't go your way if you make them guess, right? Yeah. So make it obvious. Exactly.
Exactly. So that's some good stuff there. Now getting it out of the field. I know when you and I did the Learn to Hunt duck workshop a couple weeks ago, you're a big believer in carts and sleds and that type of stuff. So what's the easiest way for Jackson to get his deer out of the field?
Well, the easiest is when I can drive right up to it, but
Boom.
A lot of times I do not have that option. So I keep a game cart in the back of my truck pretty much all season. Got it ratchet strapped into the bed of the truck, and it's ready to go. That's my preferred way of doing it. I got lucky and got a really good one. It's lasted me quite a few years. So
don't go cheap on those things.
Yeah.
I found that out. I've got a cheap one at home, and I don't know what 4'2" individual it was designed for, but you got to kind of hunch over just to push that cart without anything on it, much less when you add a large land mammal.
And do it, assemble it before you get out into the field with the deer on the ground.
Yes.
2 years ago, me and a buddy and my wife were trying to put this together, and thank God my wife was there to give us the instructions because we weren't about to read the instructions, and it was not going well.
But again, if you don't heed that rule, headlamp.
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 Headlamp. Yeah.
Pretty darn important at that point too, isn't it?
Well,
and then I've also done the duck sled. So I've got a heavy duty sled for all my duck gear, and that works excellent to throw a deer in that. And
And some of those sleds are wide enough, boom, it just fits there. But I've also found some rope, some straps, something like that to keep that critter attached to that is important. Doesn't usually come with the cart. At least they're not all that usable at times, but having that extra, because I know there's been more than once where you see hunters pulling a cart out of the trees, and they're both missing belts.
Yeah.
They're having to strap it down on there.
I found the best place to pick a hunting buddy is the gym. If you go to the gym, you're going to find a lot of guys and gals that are just perfect for the job, right? And they'll probably have no problem hauling that deer out of the field. I can tell you that.
Something
Makes
said.
a lot of sense, yeah.
Jeff's hitting up the gym. All right. Keeping it cool, dry, and clean. That's something we stress in Hunter Ed, and that's obviously something you're going to want to do. What do you think are some of those misconceptions about cleaning deer? I hear people getting the hose on it. Well, I got to spray it out, that type of stuff, or hanging or things like that. What are some of the things that people might do wrong once they get that deer out of the field, Jackson?
The biggest one for me is like you said, rinse it out. Now, the only time I rinse out the cavity is if I made a mistake while field dressing. So otherwise, like you said, cool, dry, and clean. So you want to cool down the meat. Getting the guts out and opening up that body cavity is going to be the best first step for that. And then the other misconception that you hear a lot of is put a bag of ice in the cavity. It helps. It does do some good, but that's also adding moisture to the equation. And so if you don't have to, I would advise not. That deer, body temperatures, somewhere around 100 degrees. And so it's going to start cooling off. And especially when you get one in late October, November, December, January, the natural processes are better than not.
And Jeff, I know you've worked some check stations here in the state of Nebraska that we're going to get to here in just a moment or two, but you've also seen the pile of deer that sometimes come in to those check stations.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that's one of those things, you got to have a way to drive it back. You got to get it to the check station, but piling one warm deer on top of another warm deer, any problems with that?
Well, I think you just outlined the problems, Hershey. And again, it goes back to the basics: cool, dry, and clean, right? And if you're going to violate those, you're going to have problems. And whether it's the cool part, the dry part, or the clean part. And, the worst thing you can do is pile, meat on top of meat that's already warm, because it's just going to trap that. It's insulator. It's going to trap each body's insulating the other. And I've seen those with the trailer pulls up, or even the truck pulls up, and they've got 4 or 5 deer back there. Nothing wrong with it. I mean, their hunting group went out and got a lot of deer, a lot of success. But on the same token, it's not doing you any good to following those, to helping you follow those 3 elements: cool, dry, and clean. So
I've been impressed at how sometimes you start sorting through those in the middle, and they're almost warmer than they were on
hot.
the hoof.
Yeah, hot.
Especially when we got a warm year. Now, talking about deer check stations, telecheck, check stations, walk us through that, when we need to go and do which one.
Sure. So, when it comes to it, the checking a deer, and telecheck has been awesome, because it's just one of my favorites, right? It's pretty easy to do for bow hunters and muzzleloaders and whatnot. But, the telecheck, where you're able to just in the field call in the information and checking your deer, pretty slick. When it comes to the firearm deer season, it's an actual physical take it to the check station. Now, that entails going to a check station near your hunting area, and physically bringing the carcass to one of our staff or biologists that'll be there, and then we'll be able to look over the deer, take down some information, and verify all the information is correct from you, and then go ahead and issue a seal. And that seal is a metal band, if you will, that's affixed. And once it's locked on the leg or the antler, you can't unlock it. You can't pull it apart, and it's part of that animal, so that when you're transporting that animal, everybody knows now that you've officially checked that animal in. That's the one that was at the check station, and then you're good to go. Then you can take that deer to a processor, or you can take it home, bone out the meat, take it back to camp, whatever you want to do. But those are pretty important pieces of it, and there's a timeline with that as well. You don't have weeks or months to check in a deer, and I believe with firearm deer season, it's 48 hours following the close of the season. So you have a specific timeline, and that's something you need to keep in mind, because our biologists want to make sure they get the best information possible.
And the neat thing is, jump online. You can grab a hold of the current deer hunting regulations. It's got the list of those check stations for the November firearm deer season. That's the only time you have to take it to a physical check station. That includes folks that are fortunate. You can use archery equipment. That archery permit's still good during that time, even if you get it the night before, and you're not able to recover it till those dates that the November firearm season starts. Telecheck's closed. It's off at that time. You need to take it to a physical check station. There's a bunch of them listed here that'll help you kind of zero in on where that is. If you're going on a trip to go deer hunting, always a good idea to kind of know where that check station is for the way home, or off you go there. And I believe that you have to have it checked by, is it 1 o'clock on the Monday after? No later than that.
There you go. Yep.
It changed a couple of years ago.
Yep. And so make sure if you got any questions about that, you can always give us a call at our headquarters, 402-471-0641. I've got questions about that. But that's some good information in there. Make sure you do it right. That helps our wildlife biologists. It helps in the law enforcement side of things as well. It helps us as hunters get a better idea of populations and trends and things like that. So off you go.
Well, and not only that, but check stations is just a cool place to hang out.
It can be fun.
Oh my gosh. There's all these hunters bringing deer in. You get to see all these cool deer that other hunters have harvested, and they'll look at your deer, and there's some high fives, there's some pats on the back. I know some of the stations actually serve like biscuits and gravy and breakfast. It's like, man, this is all right. I can hang out here for a while, and I have hung out at check station for a while.
You'll notice that some of the people coming to check in deer really take their time to see what other deer roll in, especially around halftime of the football game or just before kickoff or something along those lines, or in the evening. They just kind of hang out there.
Some don't want to leave.
No. There's a lot of happy people there as well, which is kind of cool. It's a lot of fun. It's a Nebraska thing, to say the least. Now, we've got our deer checked, whether it's telecheck or during the November firearm season. We've got that physical check-in station, and we got the seal on it, that metal seal Jeff was talking about. Here's one I'm going to toss out, and this one's fun. We're going to probably have a whole episode on this. Hanging deer. Do you hang your deer, and if so, how long? If not, why not? So you got it done. You're ready to go. You can take it to a processor now, who's going to ask for your hunting permit information, take down that seal number, and do some things like that. A lot of folks now, I think probably more than ever, probably skin it themselves and debone it, which is a completely different episode. We'll have to do that on a video sometime, because that's a fun one, but it's also a little bit more in depth than what we're able to go into in this podcast. Hanging deer, Jackson, take it away. Do you hang your deer?
I do, when I have the opportunity and the time. So most of the time, how long I hang it depends on when my opportunity to process it is going to be. So I don't have like a set schedule. I don't have like, it needs to hang at this temperature for this long, for this many days. You know, I do hang it. I do, it'll sit anywhere from 1 to, I think I've done up to 3 days. So I don't get too crazy with it. But the big things are to just make sure it's out of the sun. The sun will warm that up more than anything. Keep it in a cool, dry place. And then, hanging meat can be really, really good for it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. All right, Jeff?
No, I don't. I mean, I hang it, once I'm back to deer camp, I hang it. We have we call it the meat tree, that we put our deer up in the tree and hoist them up by ropes that are hanging off the ground, and primarily so other critters can't get to them, and they can just kind of hang there. And if there's any bleeding or whatever, it's done in one spot. But and then we can work on them there, and that's where a lot of times we've done a lot of our caping and whatnot at that same spot. So in that regard, yes, but for tenderness and all that, like beef cattle, no, I don't hang deer for that reason. There's a big difference between a deer and a bovine, right? And certainly we age, beef and those kind of, to some extent bison even, but not nearly to the extent. And the reason is simple. A lot of our beef has a lot of fat interconnective tissue, and that's what kind of breaks down in the aging process. When it comes to deer, they don't have a lot of that interstitial fat connective tissue in the at the cellular level, and so it's doing it not much good to hang, because there's not a lot of those fat connective tissues that are actually breaking down. So therefore, it's not really benefiting it much. Kind of the wise assumption is, after rigor mortis has started to set out, that's a good time, and I wouldn't necessarily argue with that. But outside of that, I don't see a huge benefit to 10 days, 12 days. I don't see the benefit to that.
See, this is a fun one to debate, because it's one of those things. There's some evidence on both sides. There really is. In fact, we've talked to several folks that are involved with meat in the meat lab here at the University of Nebraska Lincoln, and they're split. Yeah. On whether they do it and if you can do it and if it works and all that type of stuff, which is kind of fun one to get into. I'm a big believer. If that animal is really stiff, that rigor mortis, that's just part of the natural process after death, I don't touch it. I won't touch it, because I do need it to, one, it's easier to work with when it loosens up a little bit. However, if it's hot, which I'm not sure we have to deal with now, until the end of the season, you'll find out we're in short sleeves come November 13th or whatever. But then it might be just kind of a race again to get the skin off, let it cool off, and go from there. But that's a fun one. We'll have to get more into that just another time. But if you've got the ability, get it up there. That's easier to work on. But a lot of folks, even a lot working with beef, they don't hang beef that often. They use great big cradles. Process it right there on the table. So that's a good one. What else are we missing? We're kind of coming to the end of this session of it, but are there anything else that you really want to hit on?
The only thing I want to hit on is after the harvest, there's transport. And I always tell people, there's do's and don'ts when it comes to transport. And the don'ts are just, avoid transporting a deer so that everybody has to see it. And you're driving, I know guys will lay the tailgate down, drive around town, show off their deer. that's just not what everybody wants to see. And so I just, have some decor, when it comes to transport the deer, and not only the deer, but yourself. I don't know how many times I've seen people come to the check station and you can tell they got a deer. If you can clean up a little bit, clean the truck up, whatever, it just looks better. It just represents us better. So just having a little bit of decorum when it comes to transporting deer.
You made a great point there. And, 99% of people don't want to see that driving down the highway. Nope. So it's
deer hunters don't want to see that
exactly.
necessarily.
You want to set a good example. Yep. And the other thing is driving, I think a lot of meat gets ruined when you're driving around town showing off the deer to your buddies. And so it's something that you want to have a game plan. I got a deer. Here's the steps that I need to take, and then you'll come out with better meat.
Yeah, and that's a good point. If you'll treat that carcass now like it's supposed to end up being, and it will end up being, and that is some of the most delicious table fare you're ever going to have. If you'll treat it that way from start to finish, your deer tastes delicious. Yep. In fact, some of the best deer steaks in the world that I've ever tasted come from my deer or others that have done that same level of making sure that they take care of the meat from the time it's down, actually before the shot, all the way to the time it comes to the table. A little bit of extra work. Incredible table fare.
That gamey flavor that people refer to.
That doesn't come from the deer.
No, that comes from mishandling the carcass.
Exactly.
That's an excellent point. And I think we're going to have to do, Kayla, a whole segment on maybe processing, what parts come from where, what you're looking for, and then get into some of the cooking and things like that. Because there's some great general guidelines that we can help folks with. But I think that's going to be a whole episode into itself. So with that said, guys, I appreciate it. That's been some good information here. And for those that are listening, make sure if you got questions, go to Hunt Nebraska's Facebook page and type them up. Get us in there. You'll get Jeff and Jackson's take on, as well as Kayla. She'll set them straight. So make sure you get on Facebook and give that a follow, and make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you know when the next time we drop another one. Like I said, we're done with the How to Deer series for the most part here. We might have a little extras to toss in there, but the podcast is just getting started. Come on back and hang out with us. And the only way to do that is subscribe on your favorite audio app so that you know when the next episode goes live. Until then, get out there, do some deer hunting.
Hunt Nebraska, brought to you by your Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.